mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 1, Episode 4 of HBO's Winning Time, entitled Who the F is Jack McKinney? I know you guys are probably wondering, since when does he censor himself? Well, I'm going to let you in a little bit of background knowledge here. I can't really swear too much within like the first 30 seconds or so of a video. It affects my ability to be able to get ads up and to monetize this little project I'm working on here. So I don't want it to be a project, but currently it is. But that's why I had to censor myself when I read the title, but don't expect that to be happening too much more. So you remember last week when I said after this episode we would be talking a lot more about Jack McKinney? Sort of, but not quite. There is much to discuss about Jack McKinney as his storyline as part of the A-plot here, but the thing that I thought we might be talking about regarding Jack McKinney did not happen this episode. And I think a lot of that has to do with, again, the pacing on this show. And I'm holding myself accountable here as it pertains to how I'm reacting to the pacing. I assumed coming into this show, and the assumption is my fault, obviously, that this show was going to take this book and condense it into a limited series, 6, 8, 10 episodes, something like that, and it would tell us the story of the Showtime Lakers in about that many episodes. It's clear to me now at this pace that they are probably going for something that's going to be like a multi-season arc. I mentioned last week, like, oh, we're 3 episodes in and we haven't gotten to this. Well, now we're 4 episodes in and we finally made it to training camp, but we have not actually made it to the season yet. The first season, no less. So you can imagine, depending on how they decide they want to tell this story, this could be something where this could play out multiple seasons of television, depending on how much time you want to spend in each regular season. The only thing is, I just feel like at a certain point, you're going to have to start creating storylines and characters or whatever that might not be true to what actually happened, just to kind of extend it, because you don't want to have a season of a television show that follows a season of a basketball team that's just not very compelling for however many months an NBA season takes place. Around, we'll say, November-ish to April-ish is how long generally an NBA season lasts. So what's that, like 5 months? So, if you want to make a television show that's 10 episodes, but it covers 5 months of basketball, and maybe it's just not a very entertaining for television season of basketball. Like, the Lakers could win 60 games, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a season of television that's interesting to watch. You might have to start either drawing things out, which the show is clearly already doing at this point, or creating new things that might not have happened, or stretching the details of reality in order to draw some things out. I don't know what the plan is long term for the show, but as of right now, it is moving at a pretty slow pace. But again, that's on me because it's moving at a pace that's slow relative to what I assumed it was going to be moving at coming into the season. Looking at it now, I'm not upset with the pace at all. It's just slower than I anticipated, but that doesn't make it slow. It just makes it not what I expected. I just need to come to grips with the reality of the show versus my expectation. But at the end of the day, even a show where if our only measure for progress is how far we are into the reality, we are still very, very, very short way into that reality because we haven't even gotten to the first game of the first season. But we could be light years into the story that they want to tell here, which involves more than just this is what it was like to watch the Lakers in the 80s. They've spent 3 episodes on a coaching search alone. So there's a whole lot of different ways they can do this. And I am satisfied because at the end of the day, the show is richly entertaining and I'm enjoying watching it. The pacing would be a problem if I'm sitting here looking at the proverbial watch, or maybe in this case calendar, and going, wow, we just haven't gotten anywhere. When are we going to start telling this story? We started telling the story. It's just not moving at the pace that I incorrectly assumed that it would. But having said that, that's why we're not getting into all of that, to pull back around to my original point of that's why we're not going to get into everything about Jack McKinney that I thought we might get into this week. But I think it's pretty safe to say, no, I take it back. There's a lot that can happen between the portion of the Jack McKinney story that I think we're going to end up spending some time talking about and where we are right now. So I can't even say with certainty that will be the end of episode 5. It may not be. But having said that, let's talk about this episode. So the A-plot, who the fuck is Jack McKinney, right? So it revolves around Jack McKinney trying to incorporate his idea of how the Lakers should play into their system that it's like mixing oil and water. It's not happening. He wants to essentially tear down their system that they have been using up to this point because it's the same thing everyone else does, and he wants to interject something different. And there's an interesting scene where he's showing them on a projector a couple of plays that they ran successfully, one that they didn't. Each of these plays took, I'd say about, I don't remember the exact numbers, but the shortest one was 19 seconds. So we'll say on average about 20 seconds out of a 24-second shot clock for them to for them to essentially have a 66% chance of coming away with points. They score on 2 of those possessions, they don't on 1. So with an average of 20 seconds, you've spent a minute with the basketball in your time, and you walk away with 4 points. Then he shows a fast break situation where they score in 5 seconds. So he's like, okay, why would you run an offense where you may score 4 points in 1 minute, but you have this option of scoring 2 points in 5 seconds? And of course, there's the general logic that any basketball fan would respond with is that fast breaks don't create themselves. You know, there has to be something that sparks a fast break. And McKinney makes the argument that you guys can spark the fast break. So part of doing that, where you're constantly running, constantly moving the ball, is you need to be conditioned. And a lot of these guys are not accustomed to that. And McKinney's having them do really heavy cardio stuff, suicide drills, running all the time, all kinds of things to help build up their stamina, so that way at the end of a game, when the other team is, as he says, like, you know, tugging on their shorts, they'll be lacing up their track shoes to run them out of the gym. So that's kind of where the A plot starts at. But it also moves into an area where Magic's style adapts to this style of play. He can play in this style of play. It doesn't really work with the rest of the team. And we see Magic trying to fit in both as a person and as a player. He's not really fitting in with Ron Boone, who, for whatever reason, I don't know. I never expected Ron Boone to be like the antagonist for an episode of this show, but here we are. Ron Boone with his dick out is going to be the primary antagonist for episode 4. But he presents kind of like the team's viewpoint of basically, this is too hard. We're not really ready for this. And somebody needs to talk Bus into either getting rid of McKinney or getting McKinney to run an offense that works a little bit better for us. Then also, Magic has trouble fitting in as a person. The players don't seem to like him. Kareem's not really vibing with him at all. He's a little bit too, I guess, I don't want to say advanced, because, I mean, this guy's a rookie. He's coming on to the Lakers, you know, with a bunch of guys who have been in the NBA. But, you know, they can't handle his passes. You know, they're open, but they're not quick enough because they're not expecting them. They're not used to playing with somebody who can find them in all sorts of creative ways on all different spots on the floor. So they struggle with this. And Magic, I think, the best example of who Magic is happens in this conversation that he has with Cookie, where he basically talks about, you know, like, it sucks, like, none of these guys like me. Usually everybody likes me. None of these guys do. And there's always that same kind. When you have a person who thrives on other people feeding into them, giving them energy, an extroverted person, someone who gains energy from being around others, and when others are showering them with praise or attention, that gives them more energy, that builds them up. When you're dealing with somebody like that, they can't wrap their heads around, even when the reality is that they might not like you. And Cookie tells them, like, you know, you speak very highly of your former teammates, but they talk shit about you behind your back to me. And Magic, in typical, I think, narcissistic fashion, doesn't take this little bit of knowledge from Cookie. He instead lashes out at her. And I think that that's a really good example of just the kind of guy that Magic was back then. At least, again, within the context of the show. I don't want to sit here and act like I know Magic or like I know what Magic was like in 1979. I don't. But this, I think, shows if Magic was as narcissistic as the show paints him as, then that's how somebody like that would react. You know, like, oh, what? You don't like me? Everyone likes me. How could you not like me? There must be something wrong with you. And I like the idea of giving Magic this bad side, where it's like, you know, we all see Magic in a generally positive way. And in this episode, he comes off like kind of a dick. Very self-absorbed, very selfish, very narcissistic. And I think that's an interesting context to put Magic in. And just like with every episode, I kind of come away wondering how much of this is real. Like, was he really like this? Is this being exaggerated? Was he not like this at all? Who knows? But that's where we spend a lot of our A-plot, is working on this dynamic with McKinney taking over the team. No one knows who he is other than some assistant from Portland, but he comes in here with these big ideas that no one seems to like, but he's very dedicated to making them work, despite the team's objections, despite Jerry West's objections. And they pull together for the last practice of training camp. Bus is there, Sharman is there, Jerry West is there. Pat Riley's there recording. Pat Riley's the fucking cameraman now. And McKinney does something different in that he doesn't have the team. He up to this point in the episode, he had the team split into an A squad and a B squad, starters and reserves, and he has them play each other. In this last practice, he does something different, and instead of being married to positions and starters and reserves, he just throws guys on the same side and just kind of allows them to flow. And I think that's smart, because if you want to introduce something radical, everything should be radical. Because if you still have everything traditional as far as basketball goes, and this is just me, by no means am I trying to present myself as a coach or a basketball expert, but within the context of the episode, if you have your two practice squads in a very traditional form, you got your point guards, you got your shooting guard, you small, whatever, right? And you have them match up, starters versus bench. It's going to be harder for them to get out of what they're used to, because you still have them set up in the same way that they're accustomed to. So they're going to play at least in a similar way. But he put like Norm Nixon and Magic on the same squad. So two guys who were trying to play point. He put Michael Cooper on that squad. I can't remember who else he put on that squad. Boone was on the other team, and it ended up being a situation that really worked, and it was showtime, and they put on a show for everyone who was there. And I think that's a good way to get a group of guys who are kind of stuck in their ways, to get them out of it and go like, yeah, we're gonna have the 6'9" guy play point. We're gonna have the guy who's the other point guard. We're just gonna have him on there too. Like, and you guys can just kind of figure out how you want to run this offense. And it worked out pretty well. It got Michael Cooper on the team. It's hard for me to assess this as a TV viewer when you already kind of know what happens. So when they introduced Michael Cooper, there was a big question mark over whether or not he was even going to be on the team going into that season. I already knew he was going to be, so there was no drama for me there. But as it pertains to the show and assessing the nature of the show, I don't know how bought in viewers would have been on this little miniature Michael Cooper storyline that exists in this episode, where it's a big question mark whether or not he's going to be on the team. We see his girl fixing their car for him. He struggles in the first few practices. He gets the shot on Magic and Norm's squad, and once he's with Magic, it's showtime, and he makes the team. I can't say makes the team. He stays on the team, whatever. And I don't know. I don't know how that works as like a dramatic little miniature story within a story. Like if viewers bought that, if they felt invested in what happened to Michael Cooper or not. Because like I said, I already knew what was going to happen, so I wasn't invested regardless. But that was an interesting little miniature storyline that they put into this episode. And then another one is boiling tension between Magic and Kareem. You know, Kareem's coming off, and again, a million times I want to know like how true to life is this. Kareem's coming off like arrogant, entitled. They start running. Kareem doesn't feel like running anymore. Kareem ain't running no more. They're at practice. Time to run suicide drills. Kareem doesn't want to run suicides. Kareem's not running suicides. And then Paul Westhead, who was introduced in this episode, played by Jason Segel, does not have any amount of balls to make Kareem do this shit. And all he does really is just walk around and like spout off poetic phrases and whatnot. I don't know what's up with Paul Westhead in this. I don't know if he was so kind of like hippy dippy where it's just like everything is some weird turn of phrase, but that's what we get out of him in this episode. We get a lot of that and none of disciplining Kareem. And I'm wondering, how does Kareem, I don't want to say get in check, because I don't want to insinuate that rookie Magic Johnson comes along and puts veteran Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in check, but he's very much not part of the team right now. And the preview for next week suggests that Magic, at least him and Magic get into it. I don't know if Magic gets him in check, quote unquote, but it does make me wonder who's going to get through to him. Is it going to be Magic? Is it going to be McKinney? Is it going to be Westhead? Will it not happen until Riley? Who knows? But that's another little interesting aspect of the A plot as well. Sitting at 16 minutes in, I don't have too much left though. Talking briefly about the B plot, which is Jerry Buss and his relationship with women. We open up the episode with our standard cold open, and he's like out with some chick at a restaurant, and his wife and kids come into the restaurant, and he plays it in such a cool, smiling, just as if nothing wrong is happening here. And that actually makes him look very repulsive. Like, it just rolls off his back what he is doing to his wife and kids. And his Jeannie comes up and he's like finger banging this chick right in the middle of in the restaurant after his wife and kids just walked away. He looks like a total fucking scumbag. And the way he so smoothly pretends as if everything he's doing isn't a problem, I think it adds another dimension into the Buss character, because we looked at him, yeah, we knew he was like a womanizer. They've been very clear with that up to this point. But the way in this episode he's portrayed, it makes him look like not just a womanizer, but someone who's completely indifferent to how this affects his family. And no one's going to look at that as something that's acceptable. But Jeannie does use this information of what her father desires to craft an image for the forum that will revolve around the fantasies of the fans. That was a great fucking sentence by me, by the way. That was impressive. She wants to make the forum kind of like a fantasy getaway where you can come in there for 2.5 hours. She says 2 hours, but 2.5 hours, we know how long games are. And step out of reality into like a Jerry Buss fantasy with like a fancy clubhouse, scantily clad cheerleaders who will not cheer, they will be dancing, celebrities at courtside. You know, building out this idea of like, you're going to a show. You're not going to sit and casually watch a basketball game. You're going to like the Playboy Mansion with basketball, you know, something like that. And I thought that was cool how they moved from, and they've been working on this all season with this idea of Jeannie trying to like gain some sort of agency within the club. And finally she gets to that point where now she has her idea. Now she's ready to present it. She presents it to Claire. They present it to Buss, and he goes, it's showtime, and we know what that means. So everything looks like it's all set to make the forum the big party spot and to have the team putting on a show. And it does kind of feel like, it feels like all the right ingredients going into a meal, but nobody can see the meal yet. Or they can see the potential for the meal, but they have no idea, especially individually, how these things are going to impact the meal. Buss knows, and I think McKinney knows. He probably doesn't care, but he wants to win games. But, you know, to him, this is his path to winning games. But to us, the viewers or the fans, we know what this style of basketball is going to do for not just the Lakers, but for the NBA. We know that aspect of it. They don't necessarily know that. They know what they want it to look like, but they don't know what it's going to look like. And Jeannie and her idea of how she wants to present the forum to the fans, again, you know what you want that to look like. You know what you expect it to look like, but you don't know what it is going to look like. And you don't know how all those ingredients are going to come together to make what they ended up making. So I think it's pretty cool to see how these things all come together. So with 20 minutes left, let me wrap up. I want to say that I think this show has gotten a lot more by the books after the first episode. I felt like the first episode, which was directed by Adam McKay, felt Adam McKay as fuck. And then now these next three, I feel like it's been dialed down a little bit. And that's not a criticism or anything like that, just an observation. It seems a little, I don't want to say formulaic, because formulaic has such negative connotations that surround it, but it feels less non-formulaic. I think that'll work. It's getting a little bit more normal. Really, all you're seeing right now at this point is the camera trickery. And when I say trickery, it's not really trickery. It's just using old ass cameras. But what that does to the visuals, what that does to what we see, we're seeing that. We're still getting the breaking of the fourth wall, and that's pretty much about it. Just an observation. I already talked about Magic snapping on Cookie for keeping it real with them. She, he says, "You're not my friend. You're somebody I used to hit." Again, typical narcissistic behavior, right? You attack the person who is not giving you the ego stroking that you think that you deserve. And that was a really shitty thing for him to do. But again, we know how the story ends up. So I'm interested in what Kareem considers to be news. I'm not incredibly familiar with the LA Times. I'm particularly not familiar with the LA Times in 1979. But for whatever reason, Kareem asked for a newspaper and the LA Times was insufficient. So I want to know what kind of newspaper is going to be satisfactory to Kareem. And then lastly, I want to talk about this scene where Bus's ex-wife comes and we find out that she signed the paperwork to essentially take over the team from a business perspective. And she basically says, I don't want I don't want to have to deal with any of this stuff. I'll be the person on paper. You're you still do all the same stuff you do, but I don't want this to have anything to do with our family. And prior to her walking up, Bus is again going at it with some chick. She's starting to unbuckle his pants. And then she goes, if any of this goes our way, I don't want you to choose them over family or something to that degree. And he goes, I'll always choose family, and then stands up and his pants drop. And I think that's the perfect whoever wrote that, bravo. Because that was well built up. We saw what I was just saying about how he doesn't take into account how his womanizing affects his family. And we had that scene in the cold open where Jeannie sees him with this other chick doing the absolute most, and how cool and calm and collected and suave he was, even though he was out with some other chick, while his wife or ex-wife at the time, I don't know if they were still married or not, comes in with all of their kids. And then he goes, I'm going to choose family. And to have his pants drop was just, it was poetic, man. We already know what he's going to choose. He's not going to choose family. He's going to choose dropping his pants. So great scene in that episode. So again, enjoying the show. I'm not going to talk anymore about the pacing. Like I said, that's my issue that I am now over. I had my preconceptions of what I thought this season was going to be. It clearly ain't that. So I'm going to just take it for what it is. But again, I don't have any problems with the pacing. I'm just saying it's moving slower than I expected. And it's starting to look like we're going to have they're working for a multi-season show as opposed to fitting all this into one season. And then I thought that they did a really good job with what they did with McKinney and how that's going to work into how they're trying to make him create the Showtime offense, how that affected the players, how that affected the dynamic on the team, and the stuff with Jeannie and what she wanted to do for the Forum. So really solid episode, fun episode. I enjoy watching this show every week, and I'll see you guys next week for episode 5. Peace.